Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode 44. We're up to round 20, and this is our preview episode of all 9 matches coming up this weekend in football. Big week coming up for multiple teams. A lot riding on these next few weeks for a fair chunk of the AFL. Who makes finals, who doesn't? We'll have a look at what this week will mean for the AFL landscape. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Whether you're on Spotify or YouTube right now, make sure you leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Also like and all of that stuff. Also, don't forget to check out all the social medias. Plenty of them: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above. Plenty of content everywhere coming from All Aussie Rules. It's at All Aussie Rules on every platform. But without any further ado, let's jump straight into game number 1 of the weekend. It's Friday night footy. It's Carlton v Port Adelaide at Marvel Stadium. Big game for both teams, really. There's only one game between them, and a little bit of percentage. But a win to Port Adelaide would be massive for their season. Put them level on wins with Carlton. Whereas a win for Carlton just makes them a little bit more comfortable in that top 4 with 4 matches to go after this one. So big weekend for both. As always, we'll have a look at the teams they've just dropped in the last 15-20 minutes. So for Carlton, coming in is Brodie Kemp, Mitch McGovern and Mark Pittenay. Out goes Sam Durden, injured, Blake Acres injured, and Tom De Koning injured, which is a big out for the Blues. He's been really, really good over the last month of football. So that will be interesting to see how Carlton cover that. Obviously, they brought Mark Pittenay in to cover him, but he's nowhere near as damaging as what Tom De Koning has been over the last month or so. For Port Adelaide, 2 changes as well. They've got Kane Farrell and Lockie Jones coming in. Out goes Dylan Williams and Ollie Lord, both omitted. Milestone game for William Drew. He's playing his 100th AFL game, so good luck and well done to him. We'll look at the history of these 2 teams. They met earlier this year on a Thursday night over in Adelaide. It was kind of close-ish for 3 quarters. But Carlton turned it on in that last quarter. They kicked, 8 goals in the last quarter to end up winning by 36 points. They were leading most of the day, like at every break, pretty much they were leading. They had control of the game, but they really turned it on in that last quarter and blew Port Adelaide out of the water, which was a concern, I guess you'd say, for Port Adelaide going forward. Last year they met at Docklands in round 18 and Carlton won that one comfortably by 50 points as well. Round 18 last year was about the time that Port Adelaide was starting to struggle a little bit, so it's not when they were in their best form last year, but that's 3 times in a row now that Carlton have beat the Power. Before that, Port Adelaide had won 6 in a row. So history isn't completely against Port Adelaide, but the last 3 years or 2 years, since 2021 at least, Carlton have had the wood over Port Adelaide. Does that mean much here? At Docklands, it's hard to be convinced that Carlton won't be confident going into this one. Looking at the differences between the 2 teams, Carlton obviously a lot better scorer than Port Adelaide, but at the same time Port Adelaide have a better defence than Carlton. Port Adelaide's defence isn't great. They still concede 82 points a game, but Carlton, as I've kind of mentioned over the last 4 or 5 weeks, the one thing stopping them from being competitive on the ladder right now with Sydney, they would be top of the ladder if it wasn't for the fact that their defence isn't great. They concede a lot of points. Their defence efficiency is not great. They have a lot of things to work on defensively. It does come a little bit... They concede a lot of inside 50s, for starters. For a team that's second on the ladder, they don't win the inside 50 count too often. And when you give up that amount of, territory, it's really important that your defense holds up, and it doesn't tend to do that too well, in my opinion. Other areas of this game that will be interesting, both teams are really good going forward. When they get the ball inside 50, both of these teams, they do very well. Port Adelaide should match up well against Carlton. Obviously, they didn't last time they met. Carlton ran away comfortable 6-goal winners. But Port Adelaide do control territory battle really well, and they are good when they get it inside 50. So they should have plenty of opportunities. The area that I guess is an issue for them is their inability to kick straight. 17th ranked accuracy team in the AFL, whereas Carlton are third. So big difference there. Both teams very similar in clearance games, so I don't see that being a major factor in this game unless one team just dominates it out of the blue. Contested football, Carlton tend to play that a lot better than most, and especially better than Port Adelaide, who are one of the lower ranked teams, I guess, in contested football. However, the tackling game is an area of Port Adelaide's game that is really, really good. So they will keep the pressure on Carlton all the way through this game, and in my opinion, there's no doubt that Carlton will win the contested football here. Uncontested football, that's probably a factor on who will win the game. Who controls, I guess, uncontested football for the longer periods? Who controls the play? Who controls the ground? And who doesn't turn it over is going to be a massive indicator to who will win this. Carlton are probably the better team out of these two, but they have dropped a couple over the last month. Couple games that they look like winning, like the GWS one. Port Adelaide, they're up and down, I guess you'd say, but they will really be wanting to come out and win this one. There's no doubt about that, because if they win this, they are a genuine top 4 chance. Whereas if they lose, they will probably, in all likelihood, almost be out of the 8 this week, depending on other results, obviously. But it will make their final part of their season all really very important matches, which is likely to happen because, let's be honest, Carlton are going to be going into this one favourites. Game number 2 of the weekend is a standalone early game on Saturday. Usually we have 2 starting at the 1:45 time slot, but just the one this week, and it's North Melbourne Geelong down at Blundstone Arena. Obviously, North Melbourne sitting 17th on the ladder, Geelong sitting 6th, and a little bit of a resurgence for them this season over the last 5 or 6 weeks, although they were pretty poor last weekend at home against the Doggies. Teams for this one, in comes Jaden Stevenson, Zane Dersma and Will Phillips. Outgoing 3 injured players, Colby McKercher, Zach Fisher and Eddie Ford. So some big outs there. McKercher's obviously just a first year player, but he's been very good. For Geelong, 3 changes as well. Jed Buse, Tanner Bruin and Shannon Neal all coming in. Outgoing Zach Tui managed, which is an interesting one at this time of the year when you're sitting 6th on the ladder and only 1 game inside the 8. Brandon Parfitt omitted and Mitch Nevitt is also omitted. In all honesty, it shouldn't be a problem for Geelong. Will it be? Maybe. North have played 2 games down at Blundstone this year against the 2 South Australian teams and have been thrashed in both of them. However, North Melbourne's numbers, everything has looked a lot better since the bye. They've only had the 1 bad game since the bye, which was against Sydney, so you kind of completely write that one off. Every other game they've been competitive. They were competitive last week against Carlton on Sunday night. And if they bring that, then there's a chance that they do okay here. I think Geelong will probably be too good for them at the end of the day. They've got an extra 9 wins this season. They score an extra 20 points a game and concede 24 less points per game. So going by all the numbers, Geelong should be safe here, you'd think. The areas that Geelong maybe aren't great at, North Melbourne typically aren't that good at either. However, clearances, North Melbourne do have quite a bit of success for a team that doesn't dominate field position too much. Obviously, they are ranked 18th in inside 50 differential, but then clearance differential, they're only ranked 8th, so they're a lot better at clearances. They just aren't terribly good at turning clearances into territory and consistent territory winning. Whereas Geelong are currently the number one inside 50 differential team. They've overtaken Brisbane at that over the last few weeks, and they do it through the turnover game. They're the number one team at turnovers to intercepts, or intercepts to turnover differential. They intercept it 3 more times a game than they turn it over, whereas North Melbourne are the 18th ranked team. So you'd think that is kind of where this game is going to go. North Melbourne turning it over a lot, and Geelong getting the intercepts, and they do really, really well at turning those intercepts into inside 50 opportunities and subsequently scoring opportunities. So it's very hard to see a world where Geelong don't control that area of the game, and when Geelong control that area of the game, they're going to be very, very difficult to beat, especially for a team that perhaps isn't at as high a level as some others this season. But they have been much improved, North Melbourne, since the bye, so they've got some positives. The rest of this season's just cruising towards the finish line, getting experience into their young players and seeing if they can develop, I guess. Game number 3, there's a double header, well, not double header, 2 games at the same time at the what I think is the best time slot of the weekend. The 4:35 kickoff on a Saturday afternoon. It's my favourite time to sit back and watch football. We've got 2 games. First one is the Q Clash, Gold Coast Brisbane. This one on the Gold Coast. Can Gold Coast continue their unbeaten record at home? A 9-0 in their games at home this year. 7 of them at PFS and 2 of them up in Darwin. Do they continue that? This will probably, I've said it a couple of times that they've had a couple tougher ones. This should be their hardest one, just due to the fact that Brisbane are probably the team that is the most used to Queensland conditions, as Gold Coast is. And also, Brisbane are absolutely flying. They've won their last 6 or 7 in a row. They've jumped up to 3rd on the ladder after their slow start, and all of a sudden, their season is looking like it's not a waste, and they could be really, really competitive. Teams have been announced for this one. For Gold Coast, Tom Berry, Jared Witts returns from injury, and Malcolm Rosas is also back from suspension. Outgoing Jed Walter omitted, Alex Sexton omitted, and Connor Budarick also omitted. Noah Anderson will be playing his 100th AFL game. He's been very, very good this year. For Brisbane, 3 changes as well, and one of them is a big one. In comes Logan Morris, Jackson Pryor, and Connor McKenna. Outgoing Joyce injured, Bruce Revel has been omitted, and the big one is Harris Andrews is out, injured, so he'll be missing, which against a tall Gold Coast forward line could be an issue. It's likely that the game will be a little bit slippery, so it probably won't be the easiest game for forwards, but no Harris Andrews will certainly be something that tilts the momentum, well, not the momentum, but the pendulum, I guess, a little bit onto the Gold Coast side. Maybe a little bit further than it already was, being that it's a Gold Coast home game. Looking at the numbers, it's hard to make sense of Gold Coast numbers. I really should be putting just their home numbers, because their home numbers are so much better than their away ones. Granted, last week away against GWS, they weren't bad. Some of their numbers were really good. They dominated inside 50s, but they just kicked terribly at goal. They kicked 6 goals 14, and that really cost them. Meanwhile, Brisbane got the win against top of the ladder Sydney. That was at the Gabba. It was a game where they came out of the blocks flying and then just kind of let Sydney back in, which isn't a surprise. Sydney aren't going to let you just run away with a game this year. They've been very, very good and consistent. But Brisbane fought back in that last quarter and managed to just sneak over the line. This game, where's it won, where's it lost? I think Gold Coast, the most important number there is probably how good they are at defensive efficiency. They don't concede shots from from the opposition's inside 50s, whereas Brisbane get the ball inside 50 a lot. So I think the major area where Brisbane struggled early season was their ability to turn their field position and their territory domination into scores. That was a major issue for them. For probably the first 5-6 weeks, they were getting the ball up forward so often. They were dominating clearances. They were dominating inside 50s, which they've continued to do, but they just couldn't convert it into shots at goal. They've tidied that up a little bit. They've moved up to 9th at forward efficiency in the AFL, where they were consistently 13th, 14th, 15th for the first 6 or so weeks. So they've certainly improved in that area, and I think that's a reason why they're starting to win these games now. Is they're still not perfect, they're still nowhere near the best at it, but just the fact that they sheer dominate that territory battle, they win the clearances, they get the ball forward, and they keep the ball forward, and create shots, is where this game is won for Brisbane. They don't do it in centre clearances, which is where Gold Coast do it. They do it in the stoppage clearances with an absolute dominant +3 per game, only behind Fremantle, who are clearly the best clearance team in the AFL. Both teams like to have the football. There's no doubt about it. Both teams, even though Gold Coast overall are -3 in uncontested football, if you just look at their home numbers, it's well and truly in the positives, like +10, +12, I think, per game, maybe even more. So if you look at it, both teams probably want to control the football. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, last time these two teams played, which was at the Gabba, Brisbane had a lot of people out and also lost a lot of people during the game, and it was one of the gutsier wins. They ended up winning by 34 points in a reasonably low-scoring game, but they kind of controlled that. Last year, though, Gold Coast won their first game against Brisbane since 2017, so they're probably in as good a form against Brisbane as they have been, certainly since mid-20, like 2015-ish. But that was a concern, obviously, that loss not last week, but like in round 8, I think it was, maybe, somewhere around there, when they lost by 34 points. So Brisbane match up well here, even though it's a PFS, and I have said consistently, especially over the last few weeks, that until Gold Coast win on the road, I'm not backing them in any away game, and until they lose at home, I'm not backing against them in any home games. I might go Brisbane. I think if any team is going to beat them at home, it is going to be Brisbane, and they are flying. It's hard to go against them right now. I think they're the second best team in the AFL at the moment, maybe even the best. Have they overtaken Sydney? Maybe. Their slow start, they've completely wiped out now. They're flying. The last 10 weeks, they've been the best team in the AFL, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens, but if anyone's going to beat Gold Coast at home, it's going to be Brisbane. On at the same time as that one is another big game, important game. Not for St Kilda, but for the Bombers. This is at Marvel Stadium. Sainers versus Bombers. 4:35 kickoff, so same time as the Brisbane game. This will be at Marvel, as I said. Teams have been announced. For St Kilda, Anthony Akaminti is coming in. Liam Henry is out injured. For the Bombers, 3 changes. Peter Wright, Darcy Parish, and Dyson Heppel all coming back in. So some big names there. We'll see how that plays out. Going out is Jake Kelly and Guelphy, both injured, and Todd Goldstein has been omitted. Looking at the history of these two teams, have they played this year? Yes, they did. It was an early season game. I think it was round 3. Essendon won it by 4 points in what was not their best performance of the year. In my opinion, they were very sloppy, especially in the first half. They were lucky to be within a couple goals, to be honest. They fought their way back. They were probably a better team in the second half, and they just snuck over the line, but it wasn't their best performance. I think after that, I think the next week was Gather Round, where they were really bad against Port Adelaide, and then following that, for the next 10 weeks, Essendon were very, very good. Meanwhile, St Kilda, they lost to Essendon there. They won Gather Round, which was a lucky win, I guess, against Richmond, coming from more than 5 goals down. And then after that, they really struggled for a bit. They've been a little bit better over the last 5 or 6 weeks. A little bit more consistent. They're in games all the way through, but they're still a little bit away at the moment. What else can we say about this game? So looking at the history, that was obviously earlier this year. They only played once last year, and the Saints won that one by 18 points. And then going back to 2022, they only played each other once again, and that one was won by the Bombers by 35. 2021, Bombers won by 75. So Bombers have won 3 of the last 4, including the one earlier this year. So you'd have to say Bombers probably on paper look the winners here. Looking at some stats, obviously St Kilda rely on their defence, especially Docklands. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but they've played a lot of low scoring games at Docklands this year. It's crazy. No wind, no nothing, but they just lock these games down. They give up a lot of uncontested football in a lot of games and just lock games down, don't let opposition score, and then they bounce it occasionally and score a little bit, but they're still low scoring matches. So yeah, they rely on their defense. Bombers, they rely on their accuracy, I guess, in a lot of ways. They don't defend terribly well. Has it been better over the last month or so? Not really, I don't think. I think they still struggle a little bit in the defensive areas. And attacking, they show glimpses of being really good. They had a really good quarter and a half last week against Adelaide. The week before, they had, I can't think of who they played, but I know that they had some really good... played Melbourne in the rain, that's right. They turn it on just for little bits of games, and they look really, really good offensively. But then there's big periods of the games where they just don't look like they will ever score a goal again. Inside 50s will go the way of the Bombers here, you'd think. Clearances, probably not too much of a difference between the two teams. Both teams, very, very good contested football teams. But the Bombers dominate uncontested football, whereas St Kilda give up the uncontested football a lot. Essendon tackle hard, so there's no surprise there. And the turnover game, Bombers are definitely the better team in that area than St Kilda. Important game for the Bombers. They're sitting 8th on the ladder. A win here will really get them going again, because they have lost their last 2 to drop from top 4 spot into 8th. And as I'm sure every Bombers supporter remembers, it was about this point last year where things fell apart. They lost a couple in a row, they lost all confidence, and they ended up missing finals. They really won't want that to happen again here. So in order for that to not happen, they need to go out and win this one. They also have a couple really tough games in the last 2 weeks, so they'll want to be winning some of those games leading up. They've got 3 games before those 2 tough ones. They have to win at least 2 of them, but I think really they should be winning all 3. Whereas St Kilda, their season's done. Not officially, but pretty much is. They would have to win all 5 games and have a lot of results go their way, which just isn't going to happen. So they're kind of just plodding along. They're probably not going to fall any further back, because the team behind them is 4 games behind them. So really, they might gain a spot or two depending on other results, but they're not going to fall any further back than 15th. So it's just kind of a cruise to the finish line for them. See what they can do. See if they can upset a few teams like Essendon, I guess. Is probably their game plan. Next up is Saturday night football, and once again another game that is two finals contenders that going against each other. Melbourne GWS MCG Saturday night football. There's been a lot of wet weather in Melbourne of late. I don't know exactly what the weather's doing on Saturday night, but Melbourne have looked better in the wet recently than they have previous years. They not historically a very good wet weather team, but they're sitting 10th on the ladder with this being a must win for them. Not a loss doesn't rule them out of finals, but a loss here would certainly make it very, very difficult for them to make finals. Whereas GWS, they're 5th on the ladder. They're only a game ahead of Melbourne, plus percentage, quite a bit of percentage. A loss here puts them right on the brink of falling out of the 8, whereas a win here does the reverse and puts them in contention with that top 4 still. Looking at the two teams, some big ins for both teams. So Melbourne have Max Gawn, Bailey Laurie and Taj Woden coming back in. So big in Max Gawn. They've been pretty good without him, to be honest, over the last few weeks, but he's back. Going out, Christian Salem is injured, as is Tholthorpe, and Tom Sparrow is omitted. For the GWS Giants, I don't know why I said that so weirdly, but Sam Taylor comes in, Isaac Cumming goes out injured, so massive in, the best, in my opinion, defender in the league. Sam Taylor coming back in after his nasty injury, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. I don't know how many weeks ago it was now, but good to see him back. I do enjoy watching him play. Historically, between these two teams, what can I tell you that's exciting? They've met 17 times. 9 of them have gone the way of the Demons. However, GWS have won 2 of the last 3. They haven't played this year. They met once last year, which was a GWS home game, which GWS won by 2 points. The year before was at the MCG, and Melbourne won that by 67. And then going back to 2021, that was at the MCG as well, and GWS won that by 9 points. So pretty even history between these two teams, really, when you look at it. Who's the better team at the moment? Probably GWS. They show really good signs. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, however many weeks ago it was, they were really, really good against Carlton after quarter time. Then last week, they got the job done against Gold Coast at home, but it was not a convincing win. They won by 39 points, but that was mainly due to their good accuracy and Gold Coast's very poor accuracy. It should have been a very, very tight game. They got dominated in the inside 50 in the territory battle, which is not their best area of the game, but it certainly was one of their worst performances in that regard, which is another area that Melbourne kind of aren't very good at. The difference being that Melbourne's defensive efficiency, even though they give up a lot of inside 50s, one of the worst in the AFL at that, they are very, very good at stopping that turning into shots. GWS are pretty good across the board, to be honest. They're 7th in forward efficiency and 6th in defensive efficiency, so they're really good numbers. Offensively, they're a better team than Melbourne. Defensively, there's not too much difference between them. So going on those numbers, you think GWS probably match up well. If this was in Sydney, I'd be backing GWS all day, every day. Being in Melbourne makes me think that Melbourne might be a chance. I don't know. They are very similar in many regards, these two teams. The only difference being GWS are more attacking. They had a bit of a period there where they really struggled to score, but over the last 4 or so weeks, ever since the Carlton game, maybe the week before, I can't remember, but they have really found a way to score again, and it's shown that they've just improved. When they score above 80, they don't lose. So that's pretty much what they've got to do. They've just got to go out there and score more than 80 and they'll be fine here. Easier said than done, of course. But both teams not great at clearances across the board. Centre clearance, stoppage clearances, not great. Contested footy is not too dissimilar between the two teams. The major difference being uncontested footy, GWS the number 1 ranked team, whereas Melbourne are ranked 15th. Tackles, not too much difference. So I think what we're going to see here is probably a game where GWS try and control the ball, and if they don't turn it over, Melbourne are going to struggle to get the footy back. However, GWS will go forward a lot. They have to convert their opportunities. Will they be able to do that in this one? We'll see. It's hard to say because Melbourne do defend very, very well. That's the one thing that's kept them alive this season. If they had have lost their defensive ability, they would be nowhere. They did lose it once, the first time they met Fremantle. They were atrocious, but other than that week, they've been really consistently good defensively. They were smacked again by Fremantle last week, but that was over in the West, so it was never the easiest of opportunities, easiest of tasks to win a game against Fremantle over in the West. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. Speaking of Fremantle over in the West, the other Saturday night game is the Western Derby, Fremantle West Coast Eagles. Saturday night football, must watch cinema this. Every game between these two teams is always entertaining. West Coast obviously won the game between these two teams earlier this year in what was at the time one of the biggest upsets of the year. They won it by 37 points and never looked like losing that one. They just cruised the whole way through, which put a bit of a break on the Fremantle domination of the contest, because Fremantle had won the 5 matchups before that one, and then before that West Coast had won 10 in a row against Fremantle. So it goes in big streaks, which doesn't bode well for Fremantle, but surely they won't lose this one. They won the corresponding matchup last year in round 22 against West Coast by 101 points. I know West Coast beat them earlier this year, but that was a different West Coast than we've got at the moment, and to be honest, it was probably a different Fremantle. The current Fremantle is a lot more confident. They are absolutely flying. I can't see a world where they lose this one. Meanwhile, West Coast are looking as bad as they have done all year. Their first 3 weeks were atrocious. They then got form. They found form. They started to win some games. But their last month has been atrocious. Until we see something a little bit better, I wouldn't be going near them. But it is a game that both teams tend to get up for. But having said that, obviously they won by 101 points last year, Freo. So we want to see a little bit more from West Coast than they showed last year. But I just can't go against Fremantle. Not a chance. Changes for this match. Fremantle have Josh Draper and Tom Emmett coming in. Outgoing Alex Pearce again. He's got another fracture in his arm, so that's bad news for him and Fremantle. And Michael Walters also out injured. For the West Coast Eagles, Jeremy McGovern returns, as does Jake Waterman, Jack Darling and Elliot Yeo. So 4 big name players, 3 of them premiership heroes from their 2018 campaign, and one of them their new full forward who has had a very good season. Outgoing Alex Witherden, Jermaine Jones, Jack Petroselli and Campbell Chesser, they're all omitted. 2 milestones for the Eagles: Waterman playing his 100th AFL game, and Tom Barrass playing his 150th AFL game. Number 1 clearance team versus the 18th best clearance team. So top versus bottom in terms of clearances. You'd have to imagine that asserts to a Fremantle domination in this one. However, Fremantle did lose the clearance game 2 weeks ago against Hawthorn. Or did they just break even? Either way, it was not a great performance from them there. And Hawthorn aren't the most spectacular team at clearances either. They've been a lot better lately, but still, it was a concern and probably the reason they lost that one. But across the board, Fremantle were the better team. The one area that Fremantle struggle, I guess, is the intercept turnover game, but it's not that surprising. Teams that get their hands on the ball first tend to not be the best at that stat, just due to if you've got the football, you're more likely to turn it over, whereas the other team, if the other team has the ball, then you're more likely to get the intercept. It's just natural, but either way, it's probably the one factor that they need to tidy up a little bit, is to not turn it over so much and therefore create scoring opportunities a little bit more often. But defensively, Fremantle are dominant. Offensively, they're not bad. They're pretty good. They average almost 86 points a game. So it's hard to see a world where Fremantle don't control this game from start to finish. Game number 7 is a Sunday afternoon football. Collingwood v Richmond, 13th versus 18th. Who saw this Collingwood fall apart coming? I'm sure a lot of you did, but they're really struggling. They're 1-4 over the last 5 weeks. They've lost their last 3. Things are not going great for them. A lot of changes though. It is a Sunday game, so we've got extended benches at the moment, but what we have is, for Collingwood, Lockie Schultz, Mason Cox, Billy Frampton, Jack Bytel, Harvey Harrison and Will Parker all named as ins. At the moment there's 3 outs. They are Reef McGuinness omitted, Joe Richards omitted, and Nathan Kruger is out injured with a concussion. So plenty of changes there for the Pies. For the Tigers, Nick Floston is back, big in. Tim Taranto back, big in. Jacob Bauer and Matthew Coulthard coming in. Going out is the captain, and a big one here, Toby Nankervis. So big out, which probably bodes well for Collingwood. They have controlled the ruck the last couple matches, but haven't turned it into wins. So you'd imagine Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox are going to control the ruck contest all day in this one. Whether they turn that into midfield domination, we'll wait and see. Milestone game, Noah Bolter's playing his 100th AFL match, so good luck to him, and well done. History of these two teams. This is the first time they've matched up this year. First time they've matched up since round 3 last year, so that is a hell of a long time ago. That was March 2023. Where now this is going to be like the last weekend of July 2024. So it's like 16 months ago since these two teams last met, which is an insane amount of time, really, in terms of AFL days between matchups. Last time they met, Collingwood won it by 14 points. It was at the MCG. Two different teams from then, let's be honest. Collingwood were flying last year, whereas this year they're not. Richmond are worse than they were last year overall, and their last month or so has not been very good at all. They weren't bad last week though. They showed a little bit of fight. 2022 they met in round 8, and the Tigers won it by 27 points. 2021 they met, and Collingwood won that one by 16. And then in 2020 was a draw between two teams in a low-scoring, shortened quarter game, obviously due to COVID. But yeah, draw 36-all. So no one really has great record over recent years between these two teams. Collingwood, even though Richmond dominated the years 2017 through 20, those 4 years, Collingwood did have that one good year. Collingwood weren't terrible. They obviously won the prelim final in 2018, and then they won in 2019 against them once out of the 2 times. They've had pretty much even across the board, let's be honest, over the last 5 or 6 years. It's not the team that Collingwood matches up the worst against. So will that mean much in this one? I don't know. They need to turn their form around. their major issue is their inability to win the ball at the moment. Both these teams give up a lot of uncontested football, so I think that's an area that the fact that Richmond aren't good at that area is probably a thing that plays a little bit into Collingwood's hands here, because they haven't been able to win the ball late and get the ball back, I guess. They've just had oppositions just control uncontested football all day long. So a team going against Richmond, a team that doesn't do that either. Even if they break even in uncontested football, that'll be a massive win for Collingwood. Contested football, Collingwood aren't great at either, but neither are Richmond. Clearance game, Collingwood not great at, but Richmond are worse. Inside 50s, Collingwood aren't great at, but Richmond are worse. The major area that Collingwood is really, really good at is both forward and defensive efficiency. When they go forward, they create shots very well, and when they are defending, when the other team goes forward, they don't concede many shots for the amount of time the ball goes in, which, if they can actually win a game in territory, get a bit more of the ball and control territory, those numbers will really stack up and they will dominate. It's just, at the moment, they're failing to win the ball and control the football and the territory. It's just been a major issue over the last 5 weeks or so for them. I don't know what is causing it, but they still have the ability. Like, most of this team won a premiership last year. So, like, they can't have just gone terribly all of a sudden. It's like a lot of teams. I've been saying it for most of the season. Between, like, second on the ladder all the way down to 13, 14, have been very, very even, are very, very even teams. Even 15th, down to St Kilda, I would argue, and maybe even adding Sydney in now that they've dropped a couple games. The whole league is that even and consistent. Outside of the bottom three teams, I don't see much difference between any of them. The major thing is obviously matchups, where you play your opponents. If you get lucky and play Gold Coast at your home game, as opposed to a team that plays them away, like, it's just things like that. Injuries obviously have an effect on a lot of teams, and just a little bit of luck in games as well can really change a season. One win here is you missing out on 4 points and your opponent getting 4 points. That swing, just one decision, one moment, can change a massive amount for in this season where there's not much difference. You look at Collingwood, they turn their draws all of a sudden into wins. They had opportunities to win both of those. All of a sudden they're 11 and 8, and they're sitting. They would be sitting. Where's that? They wouldn't be 11 and 8. They'd be 11 and 7. I've added one too many numbers there, I think. They're 9, 7 and 2, I think. Anyway, irrelevant. They'd be, if they were 11 wins at the moment, they'd only be 4 points above where they are at the moment, but they would be on the edge of the 8. They'd be a lot more safe, even though they've dropped a couple games. This winning game against Richmond, they win this one, all of a sudden they're 6, 7 on the ladder, and a chance to push towards top 4, but probably won't, but safely enough in the top 8. So very little between teams this year is what I'm trying to say. Collingwood, though, they're really struggling. If they don't win this by a decent margin, and when I say decent margin, they need to win this by 70 plus, you can probably put a line through their season. Moving on to the next one. 2 more games to go. It's been a long episode. I've had a lot to talk about. But next up, 3:20 SCG. Sydney Bulldogs, game of the round right here. First versus 9th. Sydney probably have top spot locked up. Possibly. Bulldogs fighting their best fight right now to try and make the finals. They're sitting 9th on the ladder. They've got a chance to beat the top of the ladder Sydney Swans, who are not in the best form. Let's be honest, they've dropped 3 games in their last 4 weeks. A real chance for the Doggies to stamp themselves as a finals contender. Teams obviously extended benches here, but Callum Mills, Sam Wicks, Caleb Mitchell, Aaron Francis, Peter Ladhams all coming in for the Swans. Going out is Dane Rampy and Tom Papley, who are both injured. Robbie Fox will be playing his 100th AFL game. For the Doggies, Oscar Baker, Caleb Daniel, Riley Garcia and Liam Jones coming in. Going out is Riley Sanders, who has been managed. And playing his 150th AFL game is Bailey Dale, so good luck and well done to him. What has happened between these two teams? They have met this year. It was at Docklands. It was a close game. Kind of. It wasn't super close. Sydney won it in the end by 14 points. They led the whole way pretty much, or at least the whole second half, basically. But the Doggies put up a fight, just couldn't quite get there. Swans have won the last three, including two of those at the SCG. One of them by 53 points in round 17, 2022. So numbers look on Sydney's favour in this one. They met earlier this year in the Bulldogs territory and Sydney won it. But I just have this feeling that the Doggies, their season pretty much is hanging in the balance. While a loss here isn't the end of the season, a loss here would be certainly hurtful for their season. And the numbers behind the Doggies, they should be good. They should be good. It's just that inconsistency where they drop games they shouldn't, that really hurts them. This is a game that perhaps they shouldn't be winning, but maybe it's one they win and get one back for one of the ones they dropped earlier this year. Offensively, both teams pretty good. Defensively, both teams very good. It's hard to see an area where either team, numbers-wise, really struggles. They're very even across the board, and that's probably how it's going to play out, to be honest. It'll probably be pretty high scoring. There'll be periods of this game where teams will kick 4 or 5 on the run. It will just be a matter of whether the other team bounces back with 4 or 5 on the run. Goes down to the wire, though. I think that the Doggies are a chance here. I'm probably going to tip Sydney, go with a safe option, but I'm certainly not going to be surprised if the Doggies win this. Certainly won't be. One game left of the round, and then we'll jump into my tips for round 20. It's Adelaide Hawthorn, and who saw this being as one of the games of the round? This could be an absolute cracker. Adelaide's season, while probably done, they beat the Bombers last week. They're potentially going to hurt another team's final chances if they can win this one. Big game, 4:10, Adelaide Oval. We got ins and outs, obviously extended benches. Big outs for the Crows here. Coming in is Chase Jones, James Bourlet, Taylor Walker back, Daniel Curtin, Josh Worrell, and Ned McHenry. Going out, Nick Murray, Jordan Butts, and the big one, Jordan Dawson, all out injured. So some big changes there. Himmelberg for the Crows is playing his 50th AFL game. For the Hawthorn Hawks, they've got extended bench, but Cam McKenzie, Harry Morrison, and Jack Gunston coming in. No outs as of yet. James Sicily will be playing his 150th AFL game. Hawks obviously coming off a massive win last week against the Pies. They're right on the brink of the 8th. They're sitting 11th. They're one win away. Obviously, they need some results to go their way to jump into the 8th this week. But it's not beyond the realms of possibilities. They've come from nowhere. Their first 6 weeks was atrocious. But since then, they've been very, very good. Based on what we've seen over the last 5-6 weeks, Hawthorn should win this. But Adelaide are also a very good team. They've beaten Carlton and Essendon at Marvel Stadium this year. Maybe they just should make Marvel Stadium their home ground. But, Adelaide just... Adelaide were my team that I was on this year to make a run into the 8 and potentially finish all on the brink of the top 4, and they've let me down many times. But they've won the last couple. They beat St Kilda 2 weeks ago. They beat Essendon last week. If they won all the way out from here, they'd finish on 12.5 wins and potentially be enough for the finals. I don't see it happening, but if they beat Hawthorn here, it hurts Hawthorn's season a lot. So there's a lot riding on this game. Both teams similar offensively. Hawthorn probably recently have been better than that though. Defensively, once again, very similar. Interestingly, Adelaide defensive efficiency is good, whereas Hawthorn's forward efficiency is good. So it will be interesting to see how that matches up. Whereas also Adelaide's forward efficiency is bad, Hawthorn's defensive efficiency is bad. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out, I guess. Inside 50s, Hawthorn have been very good at last 6, 8, 10 weeks. They dominated the inside 50s last week against Collingwood. In the wet at the MCG, they were outstanding. Clearances, they've been really good at recently too. They beat Fremantle in clearances recently. So, Hawthorn's numbers just look really good. Are we tipping Hawthorn, I think, in this one? But once again, it could be an absolute cracker. If Adelaide show up, which I expect they will, even with Jordan Dawson out, I expect it to be a really, really competitive and good game. Maybe second best game of the round. There's some absolute crackers this weekend. There's a couple games that I'm not that excited about watching, but there are quite a few good ones as well. We'll jump into my tips for the weekend. And here they are. So Carlton, Port Adelaide on Friday night. We're going with the Blues by 25. Saturday afternoon, North Melbourne, Geelong by 21 points. Then the Q clash. We're going Brisbane by 1 in a cracker. Essendon to beat the Saints by 17 at Marvel. Saturday night football. We're going Melbourne by 5 just because it's in Melbourne. I don't think they're that bad. Max Gawn back. We'll see what happens there. Fremantle to make amends over in the West for dropping the derby earlier this year. They'll win this one by 40. I've got them at least 40. Collingwood to beat Richmond by 22. I'm not confident though. Sydney to beat the Doggies by 8, but I won't be surprised if the Doggies win this one. And Adelaide, Hawthorn to get the win by 5. But once again, won't be surprised either way. Games of the round, as we said, Sydney Bulldogs matches up as a good one. Adelaide Hawthorn looks like a good game. Fremantle West Coast is always must watch, even if West Coast haven't been great, especially of late. Melbourne GWS has a lot riding on it, so that's a big game. St Kilda Essendon also has a lot riding on it for the Dons. Q Clash, Gold Coast Brisbane. Gold Coast need to win this if they want to play finals. They're probably unlikely from this point to play finals, but they have to win this if they're any chance. North Melbourne Geelong isn't really much of a good game, I don't think. And Carlton Port Adelaide likely won't be unless Port Adelaide bring out their best, and then it will be a cracker. So, yeah, that's everything. That's all 9 games. Deep dive. We've gone for 55 minutes. It's been a big chat, but it's a big round of football. Big games, important games for a lot of teams. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. This podcast comes out twice a week. Mondays we review the round. Friday mornings we preview the upcoming round. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Yes, returning Monday for the next episode. Episode 45, round 20 review will be out on Monday. So yeah, don't forget to check that out. Also, if you're not on YouTube, head over to the YouTube channel. It's all Aussie Rules, all one word, I think. Go check that out. Maybe it's not all one word. Either way, you'll find it. It's the same logo. Go check that out. It's plenty of other videos come out on that channel every week. We do shorts. We do team stat deep dives. We have a look. A couple of weeks ago, we looked at the form of Gold Coast at home versus away. We looked at Essendon. Are they better than last year? The numbers weren't convincing, but they are slightly better maybe in some areas. We do lots of stuff, so go check it all out, and all the socials. Go check it out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back Monday. It's all Aussie rules every day. Thank you, and see you on the next one.